Hi there, I'm Ali Motion. This is a presentation that I gave at the BRUMTUG, the Birmingham Tableau Usergroup, back on the 3rd of February 2020. The title of the presentation is Things I Wish I Knew When I Was Starting Out with Tableau. Very much an overview of my learning of Tableau over the course of the last 5 years or so. So, subtitle of this, My Meandering Tableau Journey. The view of this is very much to try and put it across that for people starting out, here's the mistakes I made and how to avoid them. For those of you who are a bit longer in the tooth, maybe you can recognise some of the mistakes I've made and also have a little chuckle at some of those. So just to give you a bit of background of who I am and what I do, I'm Ali Motion. I'm a consultant and working in the emergency services sector. So a lot of the work I do is on police incident data and helping fire services as well. So police and fire tends to be a lot of what I do. I was introduced to Tableau around 5 years ago when I started out with the company I'm with now. At that point, it was a completely new tool to me, but I was told it's intuitive, don't worry about it, very quick to get up to speeds, everything's about drag and drop. Effectively, you've got this plug-in and play mentality. We don't need to do any formal training. You'll get up to speed really quickly. And that was great because in the first few months, I had a tool which I could use and I could learn really quickly. I could create some visualizations and life was good. My background before that, I worked for a company where I was doing a lot of SAS, SQL. So we'd pull information from some pretty big data warehouses. We'd do some manipulation and end up kicking that out into Excel and in the end making some pretty horrible charts. But the view of that was trying to get the answers as quickly as possible rather than spending a lot of time on data visualization principles. Just in terms of how much time I spend on the tool, I certainly do not use Tableau 24/7. It's only a small proportion of the job I have, probably spending around 10 to 15% of my working time on Tableau. And today is just very much a story of my incompetence to competence, or that journey, in a roundabout kind of way. So hopefully there's something for everyone. For the beginners, here's what not to do, through to those experienced people who can either laugh at my mistakes or hopefully nod your head at times and go, yep, I made that mistake too. So one of the great things about Tableau is it's really easy to create something quickly. You can pull something from Excel into a data set, and within minutes, a few clicks, you can drill into it and get some really exciting graphs. You can start to really dig into your data and have those visualizations. I think one of the things to be aware of though is, although it's easy to create something quick, in a business context you're not always looking for something, but instead something specific. And there is that question around, if you are trying to put together an evidence-based approach, maybe Tableau at times is too easy, that you can create stuff that doesn't have the degree of rigor or accuracy that it might need. And that's certainly something we've seen in the past. So I started off, and it was easy to create something quick. From there, after about 6 months or so, I found myself as the company expert in Tableau. And that brought me to a position where I was sort of drowning, to be honest. A little knowledge did become a dangerous thing. On a daily and weekly basis, I was being approached asking questions such as, how do you make this in Tableau? I've seen this online, can you rebuild it? Or the one that we all hear at some point, here's my Excel report, can you rebuild it in Tableau? And there's always that question at that point going, I probably can, but is this the best place for it to be? And does that make sense? And actually, what value does it add by having something that may make sense in Excel, but having to go through the process of rebuilding it in Tableau? So, a little knowledge was a dangerous thing. And one of the things, by not having any formal training up front, I didn't really know what I didn't know. So there's a great quote from Donald Rumsfeld, the former Secretary of Defense in the US, talking about the unknown unknowns. And I didn't know what I didn't know. So from that point of view, I didn't have the fundamental principles to fall back on, especially when it came to applying to different types of data. So a lot of things that you can watch a video on Superstore, and Superstore is fantastic. But actually, when you start to talk about different data types or different types of data that we're looking at, so whether it's police incident data, whether it's orders, or whether it's something completely different, you can end up in situations where you're actually that example that we found it worked, but it's not useful for what we're trying to do. So I ended up investing in books, and I invested in books because I like to have something to put my hands on. So a little bit of I've got 5 or 6 different Tableau or data visualization books that I lean on quite heavily. But there is that recognition that ignorance wasn't really bliss, and I do wish that I had formal training, even if it was just someone to ask those burning questions to. So once that occurred, it was then very much after 6 months having to go back and almost relearn from the beginning about what are the fundamentals, what are the building blocks that I just need to know in order to progress with Tableau. So this includes understanding the difference between discrete and continuous. Why are things green pills rather than blue pills? Which table calculation should I be using, and how is that different to a level of detail calculation? I mentioned earlier that timestamps and dates are things we use on a day-to-day basis in my job. Dates in Tableau can be a pain. And let's not even get started about aggregation. Tableau is one of the things you can do in Tableau is make yourself look very foolish by dragging something onto the detail pane and watching your 23% profit ratio suddenly become 180% profit ratio. Things that just don't make sense. So Tableau can make you look very foolish if you don't understand how the aggregation is working. And then I think there's a final point about before we even get into Tableau, before you put your data into Tableau, there is always that question of how have we structured the data and does it give us what we need? So the question of would it be better to do some preparation or some pivoting or some changes to the data and the way it's structured in order to make life far easier when it comes to using Tableau. My next point is very much around the Tableau community, in the fact that no Tableauer is an island, and there is this need for the community. I think most, even Zen masters, would say, yeah, I don't know everything there is to know about Tableau, and actually then a requirement or a reliance on speaking to others and understanding what's going on. The release of Tableau, they've now got a release every quarter. There's so many new and interesting features going on. It'd be very easy to miss some or not understand necessarily the use cases that come for all of them. So especially when I'm only using Tableau as a small proportion of my job, there is that requirement of just to understand what is going on. So how do you enter the Tableau community? For me, Tableau community is fantastic that there's tons of resources. There's a blog post for practically everything, step by step, so you can understand not only what you're going to end up with, but how to get there. A big plus point for me is that you no longer need to require to search help files. Help files in software are a fantastic waste of time. If you don't know what you need to search for, the help files become a complete drag of time. You start searching through help files and you can be there for a long time. Instead of help files, there is a community there are people that you can ask, whether it's through Twitter, when it's through the data visualization community, whether it's the Tableau user groups or the forums. There's always someone who probably knows a little bit more about that area of Tableau and can help. The one underutilized, or certainly the one fantastic resource that I think doesn't get enough airtime, is Tableau Public. Every week there's thousands of dashboards loaded up to Tableau Public, and within that there's so many interesting ways of visualizing data that actually, for most users, because you can just right click or click on there and download, you can see how they've built that. And actually a lot of learning I've had is by looking at how other people have gone around doing their analysis and been able to visualize data in exciting ways. So entering the Tableau community and understanding that the help is out there is really important. With Tableau, there are tons of initiatives. Tableau and probably wider data visualization, there is tons of initiatives. So whether it's Makeover Monday, Sports Viz Sunday, Workout Wednesday, or Storytelling with Data, there's always something going on. And actually, that's good in some respects, but also it does come to this fear of missing out. There's so much going on that it actually can be very overwhelming. It's easy to get overawed in what is a massive community with lots of people doing some very exciting things. And it's easy just to sit back and go, I can't do that. Oh my goodness, my skills are rubbish. Type approach. So understanding that actually a lot of people do this as a full-time job, whereas others are just sort of dipping in and out based on their work commitments or what their actual needs are. So it's easy to get overwhelmed, and I think I did a couple of years ago. I did find myself trying to do lots of these different initiatives and actually not really being successful in any of them because they're just running out of time, because actually there are only so many hours in the day, and we all have day jobs as well, which aren't necessarily always Tableau related. One of the things I also have picked up, and it's probably come with experience, is thinking things through around, we see such fabulous data visualizations, and it's very easy to go, oh, there's no way I could possibly do that. I don't know how they've done that. And yes, there is some fantastic stuff out there. But it's not magic. It's just dots and lines, probably with some pretty good calculations in there and some very good artistic design. But thinking things through, these are just dots and lines that have been put together. And a lot of time, if you click into the Tableau Public download, you can see how people have done this. Sometimes it's very, very complicated. Other times it tends to be a very simple thing that's just been executed astoundingly well. So, not really magic, just dots and lines. One of the things I'm really keen to do, certainly over the last 6 months or so, is think around deliberate practice. So that phrase that skills rust if they aren't used, it's very easy to get stuck in that rut of using your own data, getting used to. For me, that would be police incident data or fire data, and then not actually thinking about how other data works, sticking to those curated data sets. And one of the things I think is fantastic is Workout Wednesday even. So Workout Wednesday, basically the concept is graduated learning. So every week challenges are released, hence the name. They show a solution and say, can you rebuild this? Now the great thing is that I can sit down, I can try it, and generally, depending on how difficult it is, I'll get 60, 70, maybe even 80% of the way there. And then I'll compare mine to the actual solution and go, ooh, I was very close, but I've done something wrong. Or, oh, I hadn't ever thought about using that technique there. And some weeks, if I'm being completely honest, I'm nowhere near. But the benefit of that is I can do the comparison, and even if I've got their workbook and my workbook and I can't see how they've done it, come Saturday, there's a solution walkthrough. Two great things about that. Not only can I get the right answer at the end and understand how they've got there, but also I get to see someone working in Tableau, someone working in Tableau who knows what they're doing. And it's amazing that when you see other people using Tableau, the amount of learning that you take from that. So, I talk about the director's cut. I'm Ali Motion and I make a ton of awful graphs. But actually, that process of making awful graphs is quite consistent with an artist when they talk about colour studies or this idea of compositions. Just because when you're in your workbook, it's a safe place. If it's not interesting or it isn't working, nobody sees it, nobody judges. So I think in terms of looking back at some of my work, I've got a rule of thumb that says 1 in 4 of all of my visualizations or views that I make ends up being used. Now you could argue 1 in 4 sounds like I fail 75% of the time. Now that's great in terms of, yes, you are correct, I fail 75% of the time. However, the process of going through and making these visualizations solidifies my understanding, the decisions I've made, and I think really helps the final output of the 25% that I keep. I think there is a phrase, certainly with Tableau, that with great power comes great responsibility. Just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should. So, pie charts are evil. No, they're not evil, but certainly if you've got pie charts with more than 3 or 4 segments, you might want to have a consideration of, is there a better way of doing this, like a bar chart? Sankey diagrams, very much overused, and there's a question there of whether or not they are actually easy to read. One of my favourite examples is working with a client who used 34 different quick filters and wondered why the report that they were using was A, slow to load, and B, everybody's getting different answers, Well, one of the beauties of Tableau is done properly, Tableau should be able to give you one version of the truth. But if you've got 34 different quick filters, it's very difficult to get those answers. And then racing bar charts, yep, I think that's a fad that's going on just now. I suppose my question would be, in 12 to 18 months, do we see racing bar charts used very often? I think one of the things for me is the best way to learn is to have to teach. I've been very fortunate that I've had some opportunity to do some teaching in Tableau and in other software. And actually, every time I do it, I end up learning different things. So a good example of this was I was teaching people how to break data down and look at a process of hiding data effectively. So use some calculations and showed the delegates how to do this. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, someone stuck their hand up and goes, "Yeah, but Ali, why don't you just right click, select these two and hide?" Something I'd never seen before. And then someone else said, "Yeah, but you could do it a different way." And what we within 10 minutes, we had 3 or 4 different ways of doing the same thing, some of which were easier than others. So certainly the different ways of using Tableau, very interesting. So yeah, that was the example of different ways to hide. I think one of the key things for me in terms of is keeping up with developments. So there's a really interesting piece that's been shown to me very recently by Chris Love, and this was the make point. And for me, that's going to make considerable time savings. So one of the things we do a lot of work with is eastings and northings. There we go. So eastings and northings are British National Grid coordinate system. So this is some open data from London Fire, and what we have here is the eastings and northings. They're all around the wrong way, but there we go. Eastings and northings for London, showing the positions. Now at this point it's very difficult. You can see there's some holes, and we can sort of make out there might be a river somewhere, but very difficult to interpret. Now historically we'd have to go and take that into another software tool, convert those points into latitudes and longitudes, and then use in Tableau. What we've got now is the ability to use something called make points. So in this case we've got make point, the easting, the northing, and then this number at the end, which is the effectively conversion that's put in there. And by doing that, we can then have the points in latitude and longitude. So what we've got here is the geographical measure that's put onto the this point here, and the incident number, and for each of these we can start to see our data. Now for me, that's going to save probably a couple of hours on every project in terms of not only just making sure that doing that conversion, but also keeping that level of accuracy throughout. So it used to be a pain, just in terms of if you are interested in it, that random number at the end, the 27700, comes from the espg.io, and is just how to convert from the national grid across into longitude and latitude. So massive time saver there, and I wouldn't have known about that had I not turned up to the Midlands Tableau Usergroup last week. So one of these things that, yes, there was a latest development, I probably should have seen it, I didn't see it, and I would have kept going on without knowing. So massive benefits to that. The final thing that I can speak about is small multiples demonstration. So small multiples is not native to Tableau, but it is something that can be built up. So using small multiples blog from Andy Kriebel, so a couple of a column divider and a row divider. So these are the effectively the calculations that go in there. Just to show what that type of thing that does. So using Superstore data, we can build something up that looks a little bit like this. So it's the European Superstore here, and we can see what each of the what the sales look like over by year across each country. So kind of interesting, and I like it because I like it for a number of reasons. Some of which are because of the some of which were because of the ink ratios. Some of it's because of the way in which it's laid out, and I think it's easy to make those comparisons where a traditional bar chart or line might not be quite so easy to differentiate between the different colours, that sort of thing. And I've used this with clients in the past. So here's here's a visualization we've got of heat map showing the number of firefighters available by station. So this has been, we've taken the names of the stations out, but you can then see by hour of the week how that changes, and that's quite interesting because at that point you're able to make a comparison over lots of different stations to then say, okay, where are the problems, how do these compare, something that might not be quite so easy to do when we're looking at bar charts or lines. So the key lessons for me, being inspired by the community rather than overawed. I think the things around Viz of the Day or Iron Viz is not necessarily going to happen overnight. People are very good at Tableau, but that's not to say that should put you off in learning and doing it. After all, there is no magic, it's just dots and lines. Tools do rust, as do skills. So I believe there is very much an importance of deliberate practice, becoming better at what you're doing by really pushing yourself and pushing that envelope. We're talking about with great power comes great responsibilities. That's you who's making the 16 segment bar chart, pie chart. Please stop. But no, actually, in all seriousness, there is that question of when you have these tools, it allows you to do things very quickly. It's then up to you to make the decisions on how you use it and apply practices in the best possible way. I think there's a massive benefit to having to teach. I think it really helps solidify people's learning. For me, there's nothing scarier than having to stand in front of people in order to teach them, and that really tests your learning and make sure you know exactly what you're talking about. I think the final thing for me is to work hard, but also work smart. So the latest developments that are coming through in Tableau, not only can they save a ton of time, but Tableau are continually pushing the envelope, and as a result, that can be really beneficial to what we do. But I'm really interested as well in terms of what your lessons would be. So what have you learned over the past few years in terms of your Tableau experiences, and are there lessons in there that I've missed? Are there things there you've looked at and gone, that wasn't a problem? I'd really like to start the dialogue on this. That's my presentation for today. Thank you very much. I have been Ali Motion, and these have been my very whistlewind stop off my Tableau journey. Thank you very much.